Sometimes our dynasty assets fade into parts unknown, never to torture another soul. Today, we'll talk about some players who aren't yet ready to rest in peace. Sights and sounds and edges found, you will now get down with the Underground, the Dynasty Underground, the show that goes to the depths of the Dynasty landscape. I am Trav, hosting and West Coasting as always, or if you ask Mr. Jax Falcone, Wesson and Blessin or whatever is something that he said. His interpretation of my open, but thank you for joining us tonight here on the Dynasty Underground. With me, of course, the processor of the process from the corner office with the view, Mr. Joe Kuvatakis. How are you on this lovely Wednesday evening, fella?
Oh, man, I'm doing fantastic. Coming off the finish to the regular season, week 18. I was thinking to myself, fantasy season's over. Playoffs haven't started yet. This doesn't matter all that much. Maybe I should spend some time with the family. Maybe I should get some quality time in with the wife. But of course, sure enough, I needed 7 more hours of commercial-free football. And that's what we got. Now we got football on Saturday and Sunday. Stakes are raised. I'm pumped.
Fly, Eagles, fly, baby. It's going to be a big weekend for me. But of course, I'll be very interested in all of the action. Of course, just letting our listeners know that we are posted up on the Undroppables YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Really trying to build a community around the show, so we love seeing the comments on there. We got lots of good reaction to the first episode, and this is episode 2. So we're just getting started, baby. And just want to give a shout out to all the other boys doing good work on the Undroppables YouTube channel. Of course, there is the Uncovered Team series where the anchors cover all of the team-specific news, as well as the Dynasty Pulse, our other fantasy show on the channel. We got 2 wicked Dynasty shows covering the whole gamut for you. So shout out to Biggs, Greinberg, and the boys over on the Dynasty Pulse. I'm actually going to be on their show this week, Joe, so keep an eye on that one dropping. I'm going to do a guest spot with the fellas. Yeah, that's going to be pretty fun. Yeah. And so for us, our social media accounts can be found in the episode description. I'm not going to list them all off here, but the main one is at the Undroppables on all the social media platforms. Go find all of the team's work, including this very show. You might notice we are down one tonight, not necessarily for the whole show. That man, Jax Falcone, is planning to join us at some point, but he had some other stuff going on, some other obligations, and so he's going to get in when he can fit in, ladies and gentlemen. So, Joe, this is going to be a fun show. People might have noticed off the pre-open, there might be a little bit of a theme to this one. This one was actually sparked by yourself, Joe. So I wonder if it would be stealing your thunder if I gave the description of the inspiration. Wonder if you might want to take that floor.
I'd be happy to. It seems like for the last 4 weeks, and this happens every season, late in the season, you start to see some rookies break out. You also start to see some, players that we were hoping would show some signs of life, get on the fantasy radar. And so this was just inspired by me retweeting myself several times because Marvin Mims went on a heater to end the season. And I tweeted something like in week 15 or 16, like an Undertaker GIF of Marvin Mims fantasy stock just rising from the dead. And then I retweeted again, and then I retweeted again because the dude just kept scoring touchdowns. And so we're dedicating this show to the players worthy of their own Undertaker GIFs.
I love everything. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, for those of you who are not familiar, everybody knows The Undertaker, WWE, back then WWF. That was the heyday when I was watching. Undertaker was at his peak, so that one resonates with me quite a bit. Anyways, go ahead.
As does it for me, Joe. Only one problem with everything you said there was the pronunciation of the word GIF. It is 100% a hard G. It is absolutely a hard G.
Sir, I will fight you on this one. The creator of the GIF calls it a GIF. I think that ends the debate.
Yeah, but if the populace uses a hard G, does his opinion really matter anymore? You know what I mean? If society has taken over the hard G, you know what? Anybody listening, please get into the comments. Let us know if you pronounce the word GIF with a hard G or a soft G, like this psychopath that's sitting across from me on the screen right now.
GIF is ugly. It's just not a phonetically pleasant word to say. GIF, like Jiffy, no problem. That's great.
Jif is peanut butter, dude. Jif is a peanut butter. You can't be jacking their style, you know?
I love peanut butter.
Oh, dude, it's probably my favorite food. But anyway, we can't get too far down the peanut butter rabbit hole.
How about that maple syrup, by the way?
Either sounds kind of weird when you link them to a rabbit hole. So let's move on, Joe. This this segment resonates with me as well. Big wrestling kid growing up, loved the Attitude Era. Big memory for me was going to a show in like the early 90s. I was 3 or 4 years old. My sister wasn't a big fan of wrestling. She's about 4 years older than me, but she came along as well. Undertaker's lights drop, music hits. I am screaming from the top of my lungs as, you know, probably still a toddler. My sister lost it crying to the point where my mom had to leave the event and take her home. So that was always a good memory that I stuck out, the Undertaker's walkout. And I'm also looking at my Bret the Hitman Hart foam finger right over here, Joe. So
of course,
love
excellence of execution.
Yeah, absolutely. Best there is, best there was, and best there ever will be, baby. Shout out to Netflix for all the WWE content that's on there now as well, because I have dabbled a little bit just to see what they got going on. And the production is something else compared to what we were used to, buddy.
Oh, man. I'll have to give that a look. It's been about 20 years since my wrestling viewing days, but I'll have to give it a look. I used to have nightmares about The Undertaker, though, so in good and bad ways.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So we will save the rest of that for the Undroppables WWE podcast. But we're talking about players that kind of came back from the dead today, Joe. And I think this is going to be a fun one because we have some pretty good subject matter. Some of these guys were more near-death experience. Some of them saw the light at the end of the tunnel, basically, and decided that today was not Satan's day. The first guy we're going to talk about, Joe, is the guy that you talked about, one Marvin Mims. Surge for him came fairly late in the season, very hopeful coming into the year, had a pretty good evaluation on him coming in as a rookie. He hasn't really been able to carve out snaps, Joe. I'm just going to lay the land out a little bit for you, just for some of the negatives, not as a hater or a detractor of Marvin Mims, but somebody who is just trying to see that full picture. So look at the depth chart in Denver with the Broncos. Courtland Sutton and not much else. Troy Franklin is there. We had high hopes for him coming into the season. He hasn't seemed to have carved anything out with former college teammate Bo Nix. They have Devon Vele, I think it's pronounced. He had a surprising season as far as volume. I think he was their second most targeted wide receiver. So all that being said, like, those guys aren't anything to shake a stick at when you're looking at Marvin Mims and his skill set and some of the things that we've said about him before and our expectations. But looking at it, 0 games over 50% snaps for Marvin Mims. He capped out at 47.6% snaps. Outsnapped by Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, and Lil Jordan Humphrey on the team. Mims' snap share on the season, Joe, was alarming when I saw it, only 27%. And I think, as we look in revision at what he did late in the season, it seems a lot more alarming when a guy that electric is not getting those snaps. But obviously that big play upside is immense. We saw it over these last 2 weeks, over 52 points in the past 2 weeks. I'm a little bit worried that prices him out, Joe. So I waxed a little bit and kind of laid down the landscape of my concerns for Marvin Mims. Do you have some of the same concerns? Do you believe that the talent is going to win out on a thin depth chart? Where are you sitting on Marvin Mims?
Yeah, so for all the guys we're going to talk about today, I actually pulled their keep trade cut values, basically where they peaked, where they bottomed, and where they are today. So Marvin Mims, his previous all-time high on keep trade cut was a value of 38.92. That was in October of 23, a month into his rookie season. Not surprising. Everybody was very excited. Second round pick. We're starting to get some play time. It bottomed out in mid-November of this year, at 1546. So more than, it dropped by more than 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And that was on November 17th, 2024. And then, the last 6-7 weeks of the season happened and it was electric. So his current value is at 2713. That's an 1167 point increase. So big time Undertaker GIF. And here's why. You mentioned his playtime and his snap share. That started increasing drastically around week 11. He caught a 49-yard touchdown in week 11, and all of a sudden we started seeing him get a lot more playtime. So listen to this. In fantasy points per game on the season, he finished as the wide receiver 74. From week 11 on, he was the wide receiver 22 in fantasy points per game. He was at 15.5 points per game for those last 7 weeks of the season. So his route participation 28%. His ADOT a little concerning, about 7.14. That's like in the safe zone, but you'd like to see it a little bit higher. But here, listen to his efficiency metrics. Mm-hmm. Targets per route run 27.62. Yards per route run 2.78. Let's see. There are a couple other ones. Fantasy points per route run 0.72. This blows everybody out of the water. That's an astronomical number. That's on the season, of course, right? But just phenomenal efficiency metrics with a big breakout towards the end of the season. So, and this is with a still at the end of the season, he wasn't getting on the field more than 48% of the snaps. It was like 46, 48, 45 those last 3 weeks. We still haven't even seen him hit like a 50% snap share this season. And in those last 7 weeks of the season, he was the wide receiver 22 in fantasy points per game. So I'm really excited about him. I think we can pencil in a bigger role from him. I guess we'll see in the playoffs, but I think we can pencil in a bigger role for him for next season. It seems like something clicked. It seems like Peyton's starting to trust him a little bit more. So I'm super bullish on Marvin Mims, and thank God, because I was pretty depressed about my bags in October and November. This is I don't think it could have gone much better for him in the last third of the season.
The last third of the season, but I think for me, the first 2/3 is what's concerning for me, is why did he not get on the field? And still, why didn't he get on the field more than that down the stretch? I mean, week 11 is when that surge started. Week 11, he had 20% snaps. Week 12, he had 23.1. And in those last 3 is when he hit those over 40% numbers. But I mean, this guy should have been playing over the guys that were there. Devon Vele probably serves other purposes, but for a team with a young quarterback who wants to see what they have, especially going into this offseason too, Joe, because I think another concern for me is that they add significantly at the position as well and don't rest on their laurels with a guy who they've only seen getting 30% snaps per game, right? So there's a lot of concern for me, that they're the coach just doesn't see why this guy should be on the field, which is just egregiously bad. He obviously sees that. And so just why? What does Marvin Mims do something wrong? Obviously, he's not a big guy, so he's not going to be a blocker or anything like that, but he should still be getting more snaps than this, just with the electricity that he showed. And that efficiency to me, Joe, and I'm not trying to be a hater, because I and I want Marvin Mims to succeed, but it feels similar to the tune we were singing coming into this season, because he did have a couple pop-off games last year where we saw those targets per route run and that yards per route run be pretty high up in the sky, right? So just concerns. I would like to buy, but I just want to see a little bit more before I'm spending the borderline wide receiver 2 prices, which is what it feels like it's going to take.
Yeah, well, what you can look at it another way, right? Middle of the season, they let Tim Patrick go. Tim Patrick ends up signing with the Lions and, carving out a role for himself there. But there's a reason they let him go, is because they had other guys that they wanted to be able to justify playing more. As the team was growing, to grow with Bo Nix. So I don't know. I see that as a sign that they actively wanted to get these other younger guys more involved. It also kind of gives me hope for Troy Franklin, frankly. We just saw him have a very quiet year 1, just like Marvin Mims did. But maybe the book's not written on Troy Franklin either. So maybe it's just a trust thing with Sean Payton, and something needed to click. But I tend to I view extreme efficiency as a precursor to a breakout. And what we saw from Mims this season was extreme efficiency. We would have liked to have seen it in his rookie year. We didn't see it until year 2. They were using him in a special teams role early. They got rid of Tim Patrick. He started seeing more play time, and he started making plays. The end of the season with back-to-back 2-touchdown games. And again, we'll see what he does in the playoffs, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's wheels up. I think the arrow's pointing up. And this is a guy I'm definitely holding where I have him, and I might consider buying him if the price isn't too steep. And, I'm talking to a manager that shares some of your concerns and is looking at the entire season as opposed to, those last few weeks.
Would you spend a second round pick on him?
Yes.
You would? I'm not sure that I would be there.
His KTC value right now, it's interesting you bring that up. So his KTC value is at 27.13. That's right on the border of like a second or a third round pick in Superflex. So that's just about right. I think I'd be pretty comfortable with the late second on him because I think most of the running backs in this year's class are going to be the ones you really want are going to be dried up. And, I think he's a better bet than any of the wide receivers you're going to be getting in that range of your draft. Mm-hmm. He's still only 23 years old. He had a great breakout age in college. I'm firmly we're all the way back on Mims.
I like it. Like I said, I hope I am wrong on that one. Really excited to see the offseason. And if he can survive free agency in the draft, then I definitely will start coming more towards your side, my man. Definitely. Okay, the next guy we're going to talk about, staying in the AFC here, Joe. And this is a guy who I have consistently said has 2 alter egos, and that would be Jerry Jeudy. Mm-hmm. First alter ego, terrible, bad, sucks. We don't want anything to do with him. We don't even want to see his name come up on our fantasy app. That guy's name, Jerry Jaggy. And that obviously stems from the Steve Smith spat that he had where Steve Smith called him a jag. But Jerry Jaggy decided to take the year off this year, Joe. And the alter ego, who is a really good receiver when he gets targeted and can make something happen and is a strong piece of potential championship winning rosters. That guy's name is Jerrald Jeudith. A little more sophisticated, definitely a lot more polished. And that's the guy who we saw this year was Jerrald Jeudith. He was the wide receiver 14 in PPR this year, Joe. Wide receiver 25 on a per game basis. He had the 7th most targets with 142. Thank you, Jameis Winston. 6th most receiving yards, over 1,200. And I think there was a little meat left on the bone where he only had 4 touchdowns on the season, Joe. So I think that was a pretty incredible year from Jerry Jeudy. But what do we do with that now? It's like, I'm not going to drop those top 15 wide receiver prices on him, right, Joe? So after you, sir, what are you doing with Jerrald Jeudith? Sorry.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, since I looked at Marvin Mims starting in week 11, which was not arbitrary, I saw that's when he had his little mini breakout. I was like, well, let me do the same thing for Jerry Jeudy.
Yep.
So Jerry Jeudy, you just said he was wide receiver 25 and points per game on the season. From week 11 on, he was wide receiver number 8 at 19.8 points per game. So that is definitely impressive. It definitely feels like we're on a high. Right. So whereas with Marvin Mims, I think the arrow's pointing up. This, we've got a much larger book on Jerry Jeudy, and he was running hotter than he's ever run. Not to mention, I feel like his real breakout started after Cedric Tillman got hurt. Right. He had his concussion and missed a bunch of weeks. I think it was a hamstring injury first, followed by a concussion. So Cedric Tillman got hurt because when Jameis first came in, he was targeting Cedric a lot, and he was the one that was having the breakout. And then the attention shifted to Jerry Jeudy. Now, they did give him a big contract. They obviously traded for him. They obviously believe in him. So I don't think that it's all fake. And to your point, I think there might be a little bit more meat on the bone. I really want to see who their OC is going to be, who their quarterback's going to be, and what it looks like when Cedric Tillman is healthy as well. So I lean sell on Jeudy because this is the highest we've seen his value basically since he came into the league. His previous all-time high when he was a rookie was 6,600 on Keep Trade Cut. It fell to 22.99. It's sitting at 39.84. So that is basically border of round 1 or 2. If I can get that price for him, particularly if I can get like a late first for him, I'm taking that all day. If I can get an early second for him, I'm probably taking it. Anything less, I'll probably just hold and see what the future has in store for the Browns. But, it's certainly the highest it's been in a long time. And that's usually an indicator that it's time to sell, especially when the guy hasn't shown you consistency.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That goes back to kind of, Jax's wheelhouse, the game theory piece, right? If he's shown you what he is, and then there's this outlier season that happens, he probably is still what he showed you before that. I think he probably had a nice little confluence of events with Jameis Winston, dog shit team, playing from behind, needing to catch up and stuff. And so I'm not saying he couldn't repeat this season because, like you said, contracts in place. He's going to be that team's wide receiver one for the next couple of seasons. And this is a repeatable season. But I would like to probably get out of that uncertainty with the quarterback position, with the coaching staff there, on an organization who we don't have faith in to get those decisions right, might I add. So I think that's a really good call. Jerry Jeudy is definitely a big sell right now. If you can get that second round pick, or even if you can get that mid-second and get a plus on that, if somebody's not biting on going up from that, because if I was them, I would try to not bite on sending a first for Jerry Jeudy. See if you can get yourself one of those young breakout guys. Obviously, I don't think you're getting a guy like Marvin Mims right now after what he just did, but one of those type of guys who has some of that big explosive playability, who could see a breakout in the next 2 or 3 years that could be added onto that second round pick. Nobody's kind of coming into mind, but maybe a Cedric Tillman, bet on the age and maybe what we perceive as a better talent to try and upgrade Jerry Jeudy, who could see a cliff potentially without Jameis Winston. So well met there, Joe. Why don't we talk about Cedric Tillman since you brought him up, though?
Yeah.
He was on our list, so why don't you fly in?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest the same thing. So great minds. So he, on a points per game basis, he was the wide receiver 77. His all-time high, this is basically right after the draft in May of 23, was at 2340. All-time low was October of this year. It fell to 880, so pretty big drop after people were pretty optimistic about him I believe it was a third-round pick in 23. It's sitting at 2677 right now. So it is higher than it was when he was a rookie coming in. So he is at his current all-time high, more or less. I think it peaked mid-season, but today it's sitting at 2677, which is higher than his previous all-time high. I'm pretty bullish on Cedric Tillman. I kind of see a discount Nico Collins. We didn't see much from him in year one, obviously, very quiet. And we really weren't seeing much from him this year at all, which is why, he bottomed in October. But as soon as they got rid of Amari Cooper and as soon as Jameis came in, Cedric Tillman started scoring touchdowns. And there were some nice ones, some toe tappers in the end zone, some game winners. Dude was making plays before Jerry Jeudy was, which is why I'm kind of thinking that Jerry Jeudy was like the benefactor of a target void, right? But Cedric Tillman, when the two were on the field together initially, was becoming the alpha in that offense. Now, he had a pretty scary concussion this year that kept him out for several weeks, so we've got to keep that in mind as well. But I think I'm buying on Cedric Tillman. I think I'm fading Jerry Jeudy. Again, we've still got sort of the same scenario where we need more data. We need to know who the coach, OC, the same exact situation with Jeudy, obviously, same team. But I liked Tillman as a rookie. I didn't like Jerry Jeudy that much as a rookie, so this is my own personal biases coming into play here. I think he's a buy or a hold, though. I certainly wouldn't be selling him unless, I don't think I'd sell him right now.
No, because he's not going to be getting you that value of that pocket of big production that he got middle of the season, right? That's come down a little bit. People have simmered off of that a bit. But during that time, Joe, to your point here, week 7 through 9, he was the wide receiver 1 in the entire league, scoring 22.2 points per game. And I love your call about Jerry Jeudy essentially being the sloppy seconds for them, because that's pretty much exactly what happened, because Jerry Jeudy, kind of that route technician, hands, possession guy. Cedric Tillman has a bunch of alpha wide receiver traits, 6'3", like 215. You mentioned it, the toe tappers, some of those kind of downfield jump ball stuff. I think Cedric Tillman can do that stuff nice. And for that, with people simmering off of that surge that he had, I would definitely be wanting to buy. Like, I think, a late second for him is absolutely something I would be doing. And I might do that a little bit more over a guy like Marvin Mims, because I do maybe attach to the alpha extra versatile profile maybe, where he can do some of that possession stuff while doing some of the downfield stuff too. So I really like to call on Cedric Tillman there.
Yeah, I think you get him for a third. And if you are giving up a second, you could probably get Tillman plus. That's my
Yeah,
read on the situation. And I'm definitely targeting Tillman this offseason.
I like it. And I would say, like, even if you do have to pay a late second, you can feel fairly happy that the breakout might come to where you're going to be laughing at that, hopefully, in the next couple of years if that team gets a damn quarterback. So where are we now, Joe? We are going to go to the Motor City, and we're going to talk about another guy with immense amounts of electricity, and that would be Jameson Williams. He had that big 1,000-yard season. I think he had 1,001 yards on the year, Joe, after week 18. So pretty nice for old J-Mo. Really good stretch run, of course, that's going to stick in the minds for Dynasty gamers. 20-plus point games in each of weeks 16 and 17. And I think for me, when I looked at some of the stats on him, the consistency was fairly surprising for me. He only had 5 weeks where he didn't have double-digit PPR points. And he's a guy where you think he's going to be having a 30-point game and then 2 6-point games and then a 20-point game and then 2 4-point games. So I think that was really nice to see from a guy who I love. I love those explosive profiles. I think that likely probably skyrockets his dynasty value this offseason, though, too, Joe. And so we might have to move forward with a little bit of hesitation if we're on the buying end of a Jameson Williams. But what if you're the guy who has him on your team? What are you doing with him? Is he this for you now? Or would you maybe have a hard time attaching to that consistency being the norm?
I think that Jameson Williams has improved by leaps and bounds. We heard about it all offseason. I sold that news in the offseason, and I got rid of a few Jameson shares just on like the hopium that we were being fed. Well, it turns out it wasn't hopium. There was definitely something there. And we finally saw him put it all together. That being said, it's hard to imagine the Lions having a better season offensively than they just had. He's still the number 2 behind Amon-Ra. Ben Johnson's probably going to be gone. So I can't imagine it's going, I think we're pretty close to his ceiling for as long as he's on the Lions. Now, that being said, he's an unrestricted free agent in 2026. So maybe he goes somewhere else and becomes the alpha there. He definitely delegated everyone else to sort of third fiddle and definitely became the second fiddle on the team, right? But I'm not sure it's going to get a whole lot better than this. And so that's a top signal, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think for me, I like him better as the wide receiver 2 on a team than as an alpha, though. You know what I mean? I don't think he would be well suited as a guy to take 130 targets. I'd rather him, be in that 100, 110 range, putting up those big plays, because I think, his profile is going to be streaky, right? So on similar volume to what he had this year, he could have a bigger year next year, right? Could have a shittier year also. But if he's getting this kind of volume, and I know he's getting this kind of volume, I'm going to be fairly happy with that. And obviously the Ben Johnson factor is a big one at play. We're going to be closely monitoring the offensive coordinator hire there. That's going to be a big factor on how this offense runs. And just as we are evaluating players in general, a good rule of thumb for Dynasty is just look at who that play caller is going to be and take a look at some of the play calling history, because a lot of people too often attach to the previous volume, despite the fact that there's been an overhaul of the system in there for these guys. And so it's just a really good thing for anybody to take note of, is just make sure you're digging into who that play caller is, because it's really, really important. And Ben Johnson is A1 among them.
Yeah. I mean, I'll couch what I'm saying just by mentioning that, his targets per route run was 20.36%, yards per route run 2.26, his first downs per route run 9.5, or excuse me, 9.5%. So that's, and he was at 14 fantasy points a game. That's pretty much the Goldilocks zone for a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. So that's certainly a valuable asset to have on your dynasty team. I'm just concerned that this is as good as it's going to get for him in Detroit. And so if you can get more than his perceived value, or sell him at this value, I don't think it's going to get much higher. But I hear your point, and the underlying metrics are pretty good. So I could go either way on this. It's more just a game theory thing.
Yeah, Yeah, I like it. I'm a big Jameson Williams fan myself. Got him on a bunch of teams for that electricity factor. So, at least I hope he has a linear volume move into 2025, because a dip could definitely see that floor go a little bit lower. Okay, Joe, we are going to go down to Atlanta where the players play and they ride on them things like every day. For anybody who was a Ludacris fan back in the early 2000s, that was a little rhyme from him. Shout out Luda. But Darnell Mooney was the wide receiver 27 on the fantasy season this year. Very streaky season from one Darnell Mooney coming over to Atlanta from Chicago. Only once did Darnell Mooney string together back-to-back 15-plus point performances. But I really think him coming out as the wide receiver 27 this year, Joe, was kind of all you could have asked for coming into the season. I know some people got on the hype train with Kirk Cousins and that Atlanta offense with Zach Robinson. But I really thought that kind of sneaking into that top 24 was always his ceiling, and he did just about get in there, so kudos to him. Some of that streakiness was due to the types of volume that he got. I looked into it, and he was top 20 in deep targets and air yards, which is definitely his bread and butter. Top 20 in fantasy points per game on deep targets as well, Joe. Looking at all the other work, the efficiency went way, way, way down, right? And it's really hard to see him being one of those underneath volume guys, as opposed to a streaky down the field guy who needs to get some of that separation. What do you think about him, though? Because I could see a lot of people going back in on him because of some of that streakiness and hoping for the consistency with Michael Penix. We've got a couple of things changing around in Atlanta with Penix coming in that could make people reattach. I personally don't think I would reattach just because that consistency might not be there, and I could see maybe a little bit of a phase out coming with potentially another attachment to a breakout for Kyle Pitts, who we will talk about. But Darnell Mooney, are you buying that, potential top 24 consistency from him, or do you think this might be the best season we see from Darnell Mooney?
I don't know if it's the best we'll see. I think he's a really good player. I think he had, an injury. I believe he had tightrope surgery, and that could, plus he had Justin Fields throwing the ball last year. So we saw him in a better offensive environment, and by no means like a great offensive environment, but he carved out a role for himself, right? 19.6% target share, 21% targets per route run. He was the first read on 26% of their passes. Pretty good at breaking tackles in the open field at like a 15.63, missed tackles forced per reception, and was close to, 0.1 or, 10% first downs per reception as well. So I think you're looking at a solid wide receiver 3 on your dynasty teams. I don't think I'm a buyer. If I have him, I'm holding, because I don't think that there are a ton of buyers out there. I think he's not the exciting young player anymore. Now he's just kind of like this boring but viable veteran. So I think he's kind of just the guy you keep on your team and you're happy to have him. If somebody's willing to offer you something, at or better than value, and and you're so inclined, go ahead and sell. I'm not actively going out and buying him, but I'm not selling him either. He's classic hold to me, because he's just not going to get the buzz that some younger guys or flashier guys are going to get, especially being the number 2 on that offense.
For sure. And if he's a guy that you're relying on in your starting roster, I would start potentially looking at ways you might be able to supplement that and make him more of a fill-in, and find some more consistency from week to week. But I do like Darnell Mooney. I do like those big play guys, like I've said. But it's really hard when you see those kind of 4 and 5 point performances on a guy that you're trying to slot into that wide receiver 3 spot, so you can only worry about your flex and you don't have to stress about that wide receiver 3 spot. I don't think he quite made it stress-free for you, but I do think he did give you some nice weeks as well. So just try and make sure you have some supplemental production on your bench if Mooney is a guy that you're relying on. But yeah, could be good. Michael Penix does have the skill set to uphold multiple weapons. It's just which ones are going to be upheld between Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and of course Darnell Mooney, because there's a lot of talent in there, a lot of talent and a lot of guys who can command targets. So, Okay, I kind of wish Jax was here for this one because it'd be fun to just kind of chirp him about it. But the next guy we got is Kayshon Boutte. former LSU standout, of course, is next for us to talk about. He was on the field a lot this season, Joe. Kind of puzzlingly for me, as somebody who is a big fan of Jalen Polk and a big fan of Javon Baker. Don't want to go too far down what those guys did, though. What do you think for Kayshon Boutte, though? Do you think that he deserves to be on the field for whatever reason? Or was this more of an indictment on the other guys in the room not being able to step up and take on a role and command some targets from Drake May?
I'm gonna stop myself from making an inappropriate joke here, but he's. I'll let the listener piece this one together. Yeah, he's the best option in a room of not great options.
But was it like?
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe not even that actually.
Maybe it was though.
1.39 yards per route run. It's not terrible, but it's not not impressive. His targets per route run just under 16%. He's obviously rebounded quite a bit from a disastrous final year in college and a disastrous slide in the draft and a disastrous rookie year, right? So he peaked. Actually, it's really funny. I was looking at his KTC value. He peaked in March of 2023. So that was before the draft. Just the hype on him from like the Debbie community had him at a value of about 34, 33. That was in March. And then his all-time low was February of last year. He fell all the way down to triple digits at 686. And so his current value is sitting at 2227. So that's 1,500 point increase in value. So definitely worthy of the Undertaker GIF. But were you
GIF?
But were you excited to be playing Kayshon Boutte? No. And maybe things change again. New head coach, new OC, obviously tied to a great quarterback, but doesn't it feel like the Patriots are taking a wide receiver? Polk was a bust. Boutte is, their best outside threat. I just don't feel like they are done at that position. And I feel like he's very replaceable. So I don't know. I would sell if there's anybody that's going to give you market value for him.
I don't even think they've started at the position, let alone being done at the position, Joe. Like, Kayshon Boutte is a guy, like, I'm not even going to spend too much time on him specifically because he's a guy who I would take a 4th-round pick for happily right now because I think there's going to be 2 or 3 options that come in and are above him on the depth chart next year. So that's not an issue. We can just sweep that one away. I think the interesting thing for me was, as I was looking into this got me into a bit of a wide receiver production rabbit hole as I was looking at the wide receiver production that wasn't for the New England Patriots and just took a look at all the per game wide receiver numbers. And New England was second fewest in PPR points per game, 2 wide receivers with 23.4. I don't think that surprises you, obviously. Kayshon Boutte, you asked if you wanted to have him starting on your team. He was at a whopping 8.1 fantasy points per game. I don't even know what that was because it's not even worth telling you. It's outside the top like 100 or something. So
70 in points per game.
Oh, sorry, 70. Sorry, it's outside the top of you caring. So their leader actually was Pop Douglas with 8.7 fantasy points per game, and their wide receiver production was so bad that no other team's leader in points per game was under 10 fantasy points per game. So it was really bad in New England. So I think there's 2 things that you can take from that. With a new coach and a new offensive coordinator, that can't get any worse. But I think relative to the conversation, the getting better is not going to be something that is attached to Kayshon Boutte. So I would take a 4th-round pick for Kayshon Boutte, and I would, I don't even know what to do with those other guys. I still like Jalen Polk. I still like Javon Baker, but they seem pretty dead.
I think you can get a 3rd for him. I think you could probably.
Really?
I think there are people that want to believe in Boutte, and so
is it his name?
I think that's part of it. I think there are people that are hanging on to his college days, and so I think you could get a 3rd for him. I probably, I'd probably take a 4th plus. I'm not super excited about him or optimistic about it. I think they're going to add to the room. I still, I'm keeping the candle lit for Javon Baker as well.
Yes.
So we'll see how things play out. But 3rd all day.
Oh yeah, you take that and laugh all the way to the bank for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Okay, we're going to start moseying a little bit, Joe. We got a good 40 minutes in the bag or so, and we've got some good names left to cover. So just want to say thanks to all the listeners who are sticking it out with us. Really appreciate that. Make sure you go subscribe to that channel. We are available now on Apple Podcasts. So that's a big development. We really hope that gets us out to more people and gets gets people listening and gets people commenting and gets that community built around the show, like we mentioned at the top. So we are on Apple now. We are on Castbox as well as the YouTube, which is the bread and butter, of course. So yeah, subscribe and leave a comment for us because we want to hear from you and see what you think about this. If we made an awesome take, let us know. If we made a shit take, please also let us know.
It was Boutte.
Yeah, yeah. Let us know if it was Kayshon Boutte today. So looking at Quentin Johnston, Joe, he obviously first round pick, one of the busts of the century coming out of 2023. This year, he showed that he fit a fairly specific role, and he showed some pretty good efficiency on that. He was a deep threat for the Los Angeles Chargers, definitely overshadowed by one Lad McConkey, who was one of the bells of the ball among the wide receiver landscape of all teams. But Quentin Johnston, I mean, I think he did show that he's a capable deep threat. He had 19 deep targets on the season. One thing that I thought was interesting, he had 7 deep receptions and 4 touchdowns on those, Joe, which is 5th most. And so that's really good efficiency from converting his receptions to touchdowns. And those 19 deep targets, only 10 of them were catchable. So he caught 7 of 10 catchable targets for 4 touchdowns. And that's, pretty high efficiency, probably not something that's necessarily repeatable on a bigger sample. But what's your thoughts on Quentin Johnston? Because a lot of times I do like buying into these guys who have that first round pedigree, see a big value dip, but have talent. Still on a pretty good team, even though their passing volume might be a little bit lower, but wasn't as low as I expected coming into the season. So are you attacking Quentin Johnston as a guy who could still maybe be a little bit cheap?
I can't help. Well, first of all, you talked about some of these deep targets. I can't just vividly remember at least 2 big touchdowns by QJ on busted coverages, right? Where he was just wide open. The defense just forgot about him and he scored that way. And that absolutely influenced the stats. And so I just can't help but think about this tweet I put out early in the season. It was probably somewhere around week 4 or something where, I mentioned, some of the underlying metrics and said, something I already said on the show, like QJ's in the Goldilocks zone for wide receivers. I'm tentatively making offers and I'm terrified. Something to that effect, right? And that's probably my most viral tweet of all time. Fusu Vu retweeted me, and the Fusu Hive, who's all in on QJ, just like jumped all over it. And I realized then, we're talking about people that want to believe. People want to believe in QJ, right? So his targets per out run, 23.5%. Target share, just under 20%. So very solid numbers. First read on 24 of those, 24% of those. Excels in forcing missed tackles. That's kind of what we expected when he was drafted, right? That's what he was great at. The underlying metrics are pretty good, man.
Yeah.
It terrifies me, and it's always scary buying into someone who was such a colossal bust as a rookie. But Harbaugh came in there, kind of had a plan for what to do with QJ, really built his confidence back up, and all of a sudden he started catching passes that he was dropping last year. So I am definitely not, both feet in, but I'm dipping my toe. I'm not scared. I haven't successfully traded for him yet because I'm not willing to pay what the owner thinks he's worth. But I've put offers out and have not gotten any accepted. So I think if you have him, he's probably a sell or a hold. I think it's worth finding out because he's worth less today than he was when he came into the league, right? In August of 23, he was at 49.08 in his KTC value. He dropped all the way down to 1909. That was an asset that, most of the people that drafted QJ still have QJ because they couldn't sell him and they couldn't cut him. They invested a first round pick in him. Now that's rebounded to 29.26 today. So, 1,000-point increase on KTC. Still nowhere near the value they paid for him, but a usable asset. So this is another one where I think he's probably a hold. I'm not willing to invest what they would want to sell him for, and I'm certainly not willing to. I certainly wouldn't be willing to sell him for less either. So this is another classic hold for me.
Yeah, I would agree there as well, just because, that offense could take another step in 2025, and Quentin Johnston would be the main benefactor of that, I would say, because Ladd McConkey already got a big piece of that pie, and he could see a little bump there as well, but I think Quentin Johnston seeing a small bump could go a long way for him as far as fantasy production, just the way that he produces. So good point. I would probably lean hold or buy as opposed to hold or sell. And I might have to go make a couple feelers on some wide receiver needy teams too, Joe. Got me thinking.
Go offer for Cedric Tillman first.
Yeah.
You get him for cheaper.
Yeah, and he has a clearer path to being the alpha for his team if they get their shit together. Okay, moving along, Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys, a guy that got a little bit of late round rookie draft hype when he came out. Didn't really see it in his first couple seasons, but now we saw him get some more snaps, some of the injuries that they had in Dallas. What do you think about Jalen Tolbert, if I butcher his name one more time? I don't think I'd bother buying him personally. I'd probably rather use that third or fourth round pick, whatever it might be, probably a fourth, I would say. I'd rather use that on a younger wide receiver who's just coming into the league and take my shot with that guy versus Jalen Tolbert. But you can't deny the Dallas offense when Dak Prescott's in it. So is that something that might make you put some feelers out, Joe?
Yeah, this is a guy I loved coming into the league, right? Jalen Tolbert, small school guy, and I was pretty excited about him, and I thought he would take a couple of years to develop, and that's exactly what happened, right? It wasn't, we're looking at a year 3 breakout, if you want to call it that. He finished as the wide receiver 59 in points per game. But, coming out of South Alabama, we didn't think he was going to be a contributor in his rookie year. We were hoping for a second-year breakout. We kind of got this mini breakout in year 3. That being said, it seems likely that Dallas is going to add a wide receiver too. I should say they're going to add a wide receiver in the draft also, right? I think we're probably getting to the end of the line with Cooks. And Tolbert probably isn't their ideal second option in that passing game, or even third option behind Ferguson. So I think he's probably going to get squeezed a little bit in terms of potential targets. He's kind of just an end of your bench guy. I would sell this good season because I think his value is probably going to go down, and he's going to be more of a situational role player in the coming years.
Yeah. Touchdowns in 3 of his last 4. I would absolutely be selling him off of that because I don't think that's something that he's going to repeat because
the Lamb was gone. Yeah.
He's about to get buried on that depth chart, and he had a bit of a perfect storm around him to be able to do what he did. So moving to another guy, Alec Pierce for the Indianapolis Colts. He before this season, Joe, I thought he was just kind of a track and field athlete more than a wide receiver because he was running the most routes in the league and just not getting any targets on them or not showing us any fantasy production, but actually got some targets this time around in 2024. I think, don't get too hyped up on the fact that he did get those because he's still going to have Downs, Pittman, and A.D. Mitchell on the depth chart next year. They're all under contract, all ready to go. And I think in the Colts' ideal world, A.D. Mitchell takes over all of the work that Alec Pierce got this season. What do you think about Alec Pierce? Were you impressed with what he did this year? Do you think that's something that he could repeat, or are you kind of anticipating when he goes to another team and gets free?
I mean, Alec Pierce was one of those guys are you kidding me? When he kept scoring touchdowns, he just went on that heater and kept scoring touchdowns. Him and Nick Westbrook-Akine kind of both qualify for that list.
Yeah.
But this is helping nobody because you just can't trust players like that on a regular basis. I actually did start Akine a couple times.
Same.
But I have no Pierce shares, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. Here's what his underlying metrics look like. 1, he has a 22 ADOT. A 22-yard ADOT.
That's outrageous.
It's outrageous, particularly in the NFL. You really want the ADOT to be somewhere between 10 and 15 yards, right? When it gets below 10 yards, you start to worry it's a little gimmicky. When it gets above 20, you start to worry that it's not sustainable. So I think he definitely ran hot. 16.1% targets per route run. almost 2 yards per route run. So that's a solid number, but the rest of the underlying and efficiency metrics are not good. So he ran very pure this year. And I think this is like, a 90th percent outcome season for Alec Pierce. This is a screaming sell to me.
Mm-hmm.
For all the reasons you outlined as well, right? It was just
Exactly. I don't think he's going to see it again. I think Michael Pittman was banged up as well, which if he comes in healthy, I think he will resume that alpha role that we've seen him in for this team. And then Josh Downs is just pepper that man with targets and watch the guy work.
Yeah, his KTC value, by the way, is currently, commensurate with like a mid third round pick or even early to mid third round pick. If I could get that for Alec Pierce, I would absolutely take that, right? It peaked at 39.48. That was in October of 22. Fell all the way down to 1407, and now it's sitting at just under 2,400 points. So this is probably the sell signal that you need.
Yep. Not often you get two white wide receivers back to back on a podcast, Joe, but we have that with Adam Thielen up next on the docket. He had a great season, injured for a little bit of the year, but I think he was top 15, if I recall. I don't actually have the number in front of me, but I think he was about top 15, top 20 in fantasy points per game because he put on a show in Carolina when he was healthy and getting work this year. It's really nice to see as a guy who we thought was kind of over the hill and ready to kind of sail off into the sunset. But when you look at, it's hard because he's going to be there for the next 3 seasons in Carolina. We don't really know what that team is going to look like, and you have to think that they're going to try and get some youth around Bryce Young for the longer-term future. So how are you treating a guy like Adam Thielen? Because I see him as a potential trade candidate, which I might go and try and buy him just on the hope that he moves to another team, maybe a contender. But that's a lot of factors to incorporate when you're trying to make a buying decision.
I mean, he may be under contract for 3 more years, but if Adam Thielen retired tomorrow, absolutely nobody would be surprised, right? He's 34, almost 35 right now. So it'd be 35 next season. As soon as Deontay Johnson got traded, or was it waived or traded? I can't remember. No, he was traded, then waived.
Then waived,
yeah. So as soon as he was traded, we got the Undertaker GIF with Adam Thielen. He started producing immediately. Dude still got it. Dude's still good. He had that incredible play, and I want to say it was like week 13 in overtime to essentially win the game for them. Then they go and smoke the next play and end up losing anyway. But he made like this incredible one-handed catch. So he can certainly still play, and he's definitely got a thing with Bryce Young. So I don't know if I'm ever buying 34, 35-year-old wide receivers, right? But if he's on my team, I did sell him this season, but that was I sold him to Contender when it became clear I was probably not going to make the playoffs and wasn't going to make any noise. So I would say he's a sell. Whenever you got a player this age, you want to sell them. And if you can't get fair value for him, you just hold him because, he could have a run at some point during the season next year as well and actually put up meaningful points and help your team. So this is a classic either sell or if you can't get value, just hold him.
Yeah. Or what I say is just let him die on your roster.
Yeah, totally.
Like the production that you get from him might be more worth the value that you're going to get back from him. And then he's just a guy that just, fades into that sunset, but maybe not just yet because he looked damn good this year. Okay, Joe, got a little rapid fire for you. It's just kind of a buy, sell, hold.
Sure.
Say if you're going to buy, sell, or hold this guy, if you want to give one sentence with them, do it. Wan'Dale Robinson.
Probably a hold.
Yeah, I think so too. He got some decent targets this year, and I think that team has to invest elsewhere outside of the wide receiver position, so that could be there for him. The aforementioned Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I think he scored touchdowns in like 7 of his last 8 games, which is insane. I like him as a player, but go ahead.
Probably a sell.
Yeah, I would agree, especially off of that run that he just had. Like I said, I like him as a player, but
I don't think anybody's buying it, but if they do,
no,
sell.
Totally, yeah. This one might just be kind of like a funny one. Olamide Zaccheaus had a couple of tutties in that final little stretch run with the Falcons.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think anybody's buying him from you. I think it'd be disingenuous to say, "Hello, sell this guy for a 4th," right?
Yeah,
absolutely nobody's buying Olamide Zaccheaus. So I don't know.
Okay,
get whatever you can if you can. Otherwise,
Yeah.
he's probably a churn on the bottom of the roster.
Yeah, try and get him off of your roster is basically what you're doing with him. This one's interesting for me. It's the last one we'll talk about in the wide receivers, Joe. It's Dyami Brown. I liked him coming out of North Carolina. Super big play threat. I think he had 2,000-yard receiving seasons in college. Just hasn't shaken out in Washington. I wish it had. I think I'm kind of getting off of him. But do you think there's a candle still lit for Dyami?
No, I don't. I mean, I think him, Olamide Zaccheaus, Noah Brown, Jamison Crowder of that group of. I mean, just think about all the guys. Think about all the guys that Jaden Daniels was like making relevant this season, right? He need Jameson. Talk about Undertaker GIF. I didn't even know Jamison Crowder was still in the league, and all of a sudden he's catching touchdowns, right?
Same.
Yeah, so of all those guys, I think Noah Brown's the most talented, but of course he got hurt. Obviously Terry McLaurin's the number one there. I don't think they have their answer at wide receiver 2 yet. And I think that the fact that they're making the playoffs this year, I think they're surprised by that and the quick ascent. So there's probably another wide receiver joining the Commanders here in the next few months.
Yeah, they should fucking let Dyami try though. It'd be way cooler if they did. Way cooler if they did.
It's over.
He'd be fun, man. He'd just be fun. That's all I'm trying to say there. Okay. And who doesn't like fun? Okay, we're gonna talk about some quarterbacks here, Joe. And I have to be honest, like there wasn't that many quarterbacks that returned from the dead. I think it was mostly just deaths out there in the quarterback landscape. I'm gonna list some of them out for you here, Joe. I'm glad that you're sitting because it might knock you off your feet. CJ Stroud had a dog shit fantasy season.
How dare you? He'll be fine.
Yeah, but he still had a shit fantasy season.
It was terrible. It was objectively bad. Very
Mahomes wasn't great for fantasy this year after getting all those wide receivers. He's still going to be fine too. Obviously, he didn't die. Anthony Richardson might have though.
Real quick, I saw just a great, the PR meme, right? Where it's like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, 3,900 yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Hi, like the handsome guy. And then Aaron Rodgers, 3,900 yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Like, hello, HR? So, I don't know. It was bad for Mahomes. It was bad for Rodgers, statistically speaking. Obviously, record has a lot to do with that. And, God, you could argue at one point Rodgers was looking pretty goaty himself. But Mahomes obviously has earned the right to put up bad stats and still keep our faith.
Yeah, and then we had Tua with more issues with his noggin. Deshaun Watson, he died, but I think his libido might be alive and well. I can't speak for him. Justin Fields.
With Watson, they restructured his contract to set it up so that they can cut him after next season. Obviously, he's coming off of Achilles injury. I doubt he plays it down again for the Browns. I don't know if he plays it down again in the NFL. But even when healthy, it was as bad as it's ever looked. There's something else going on there. Forget about it.
And if he doesn't play another down in the NFL, the Toronto Argonauts will absolutely be looking out for him on the free agent market. He actually has a decent skill set for the CFL, which is kind of funny, but don't want to see it. Kirk Cousins, terrible year. Derek Carr, Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott. Justin Fields is kind of interesting because he did show some flashes, and I think he could end up getting a starting shot for an NFL team next year. But I think his profile is one that could see another cliff after that, potentially, right? And so he's one of those guys where you have to try and, if you're going to acquire him, which I love acquiring running quarterbacks, you have to make sure you hit it and quit it at the right time, right? You got to really make sure you outrun his inability to keep a job, if that makes sense. So Justin Fields is a very, very interesting one for me with the ultimate upside he could present.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's going to be, there will be more Justin Fields moments. I think there'll be more Kirk Cousins moments. We'll see.
Yeah, totally.
But, I don't think any of these guys are dead.
No, this was just for 2024. Absolute caveat. That was just for 2024 because I think there's dynasty value abound with some of these guys.
We're going to be doing Undertaker GIFs with a couple of these guys next year.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So it was a tough season at the quarterback position. But there were a couple of fun ones. Not a death or anything, but shout out to Baker Mayfield for what he did. He was one of my most fun quarterbacks to watch on the season. Not on the show sheet, not for us to talk about, but very fun to watch. Guy that was in his draft we are going to talk about, and that's Sam Darnold with the Minnesota Vikings. Everybody's talking about his situation, so we're going to do it too, Joe. He had over 3,500 passing yards this year and 35 touchdowns in that Kevin O'Connell offense. Definitely an offense we want to attach to, just get pieces of it. We want pieces of it at cost is fine. I have a little bit of a hot take with Sam Darnold too, Joe, that he could be a dark horse MVP candidate this year. They're only paying him $10 million, and think about where that team would be without him, with J.J. McCarthy's injury as well, because that would not be good. They definitely would not be the 14-3 team that they are right now. He did an amazing job with them and Kevin O'Connell. I think part of that credit goes to Kevin O'Connell, but watching Sam Darnold play, he was dealing out there on a regular basis as well. So hats off to him for turning that around. Likely made himself an absolute boatload of money this season. What are you doing with a guy like that, though? Because he's kind of, I can't remember which receiver we were talking about, but it's a guy that's shown us not great play previously, even to the point of admitting that he saw ghosts. And now we're seeing a massive surge that we like, albeit attached to a very innovative play caller, Joe. So how do you put those puzzle pieces together?
Yeah, very innovative play caller, a great wide receiver core, well, at least at the top, a great tight end, a great pass catching running back. I was impressed with Darnold. I had completely written him off. His previous all-time high on Keep Trade Cut was in October of 2021. He was at 5,053 points. It fell to a low of 614. That's basically you're almost, you're completely written off and almost out of the league at quarterback, especially in Superflex. And then his current value is sitting at 4,491. So that's a 3,800 point increase. He is the most Undertaker GIF of the batch today. By far the biggest improvement in KTC value. I think it's safe to say he's landing a starting job somewhere next year. So that in and of itself in Superflex leagues is super valuable. A 4,400 points is basically a late first, early second. It's somewhere in there in terms of value. I can tell you firsthand, this season, I was trying to sell Sam Darnold where I had him, and I could not get a first. I was holding out for a first, did not get it anywhere. So I don't think the market's actually paying a first for him yet because they see the writing on the wall with J.J. McCarthy. They know the situation was great, and they're not buying it. The market's too smart for Sam Darnold. We're going to need to see it for more than just one season. This is probably another optimal outcome for Darnold. I'd probably trade him for, I think you have to hold Sam Darnold. I think you have to see where he ends up. I'd probably take like the 2.01 or something for him if I could get that. But I don't think anyone's, I think it's wisest to hold just to see maybe Minnesota does re-sign him and they relegate J.J. McCarthy to the bench. The team sure seems to like him. If he stays in Minnesota, he's worth a first. He's going to increase in value. The pricing right now is just based on uncertainty. So I think you just got to hold and find out. I don't know. I don't think I'd be willing to buy unless it was like a mid to late second because, we've seen this movie. We've got a big data set on him. Maybe he turned it around. Maybe something clicked, but odds are this was an outlier season. And so that's probably sell or hold territory.
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on there. And I think, that sell window isn't actually right now. It's when you see that contract signed. I think that could blow up in your face if he signed with a team like the Raiders. But I think he would probably
I'm right here.
Sorry.
It's actually my nightmare. I have a feeling we're going to overpay for Sam Darnold. Anyways.
Or somebody. I think
tells you everything you need to know, right? I'm scared my favorite team is going to sign him and it's going to blow up in our faces.
I also kind of think, though, that writing on the wall in Minnesota that you mentioned might not necessarily be in permanent marker, if you know what I'm saying. I think a short-term deal for Sam Darnold coming back to Minnesota, considering the injury to J.J. McCarthy, could be in both of their best interests, especially because Sam Darnold gets a chance to maybe see what the 2026 free agency, 2027 free agency market looks like after having another good season with Kevin O'Connell. I think like staying in the cushy confines of that offense would be a best case Ontario for Sam Darnold, but I don't know if it's going to shake out that way. And are they actually going to go into next season coming off of a 14-3 year with JJ McCarthy, who hasn't done anything?
Did you just say best case Ontario?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. That's from Trailer Park Boys. That's from Trailer Park Boys. Okay. Yeah, Ricky. That's what Ricky says. Yeah, it's best case Ontario, Bubbles. You'll hear some of those. Like I flip in lots of little slang terms and shit here. So if you hear any and you get the reference,
I didn't hear anything you said after best case Ontario. So yes, I don't
remember anything I said after best case Ontario. So I think we're in the same place here. No, just mentioning that's the best spot for Sam Darnold. So it'll be interesting to see it shake out. Because I think that sell window's a little down the road.
I don't know. They went and grabbed Daniel Jones. I think they'll have Daniel Jones as that like insurance plan for JJ McCarthy. Sure. Unless Sam Darnold takes him to the NFC Championship, I just don't think they're going to keep him. Why would you? You've got this rookie quarterback who you really like on a very low salary that gives you the flexibility to go fill the gaps everywhere else on your team. If you truly believe in your coach and you truly believe in your system, and you've seen him make other quarterbacks thrive, why couldn't he do it with a first-round talent like J.J. McCarthy, who we haven't seen fail? And if he does, you've still got Daniel Jones, who we've seen take teams to the playoffs before, right? Not that we have a ton of faith in Daniel Jones. Don't get me wrong. I don't.
Easy,
but
Joe.
They've got the insurance. They've got the succession plan. They've got the insurance plan. It just feels like Sam Darnold's going to choke in the playoffs. Like I just don't. I don't believe it yet. We'll put it that way. We'll just
Fair enough. Fair enough. I just think with that Super Bowl window coming in with JJ McCarthy, do you think the expectation is still Super Bowl? I think that's a little bit lofty to be putting on him. You know what I mean? And so that could even be a move where the owner could step in and be like, no, I think we need to keep this window going instead of pushing it 2 or 3 years down the road, because things might not be the same 2 or 3 years down the road. But anyway, bit of a rabbit hole. We still need to see it shake out before we can start assessing what's going to happen. And that's probably going to be one of the biggest storylines to monitor in the offseason, because he does seem like that textbook option for one of those shite teams, sorry, Joe, to overpay for him and pay the price for it, really.
Yeah. Jets would be the funniest outcome.
That would be unbelievable, hey? Just right back into the hotbed. Yeah. No thanks, says Sam Darnold. Okay, Bryce Young, another quarterback who was drafted high and has taken an immense amount of heat. Rightfully so, though. He had a terrible, terrible rookie season. Those guys are guys that I kind of root for, Joe, so it's been pretty dope to see the surge from him coming down the stretch this season, putting a little bit together, sparking a little bit of optimism for the Carolina Panthers and Dave Canales, some of the pieces that are around him. So Bryce Young, do you think, like, would you say he might be in like your top 18 dynasty quarterbacks? How'd the value look on Keep Trade Cut, and how would you value Bryce Young amongst the quarterback landscape?
Good question. I need to update my dynasty ranking, so I don't have a firm answer.
Stay tuned for those people, because Joe and I are both going to do that, and along with Jax's, you'll have a really nice set of ranks on the undroppables.com. Stay tuned, everybody. Sorry, I had to segue that plug off of the dynasty rankings there, Joe.
Sure. Now I really got to do it.
Yeah, you're committed.
So Bryce Young's all-time high, not surprisingly, he was first overall pick in the draft. He was at 61-65. That was in August of 23, before he ever played a down in the NFL. It dropped in October of this year to of 2024. All the way down to 22.31. So, 4,000 point drop. His current value is at 47.65. So a 2,500 point improvement from the all-time low, still, 2,400 points off of the all-time high. So that kind of feels about right. I think that probably puts him in like the the QB 21 to 24 range as far as Keep Trade Cut is concerned. But I don't really look at that. It's really just a question of what's the story here? What happened? Disastrous rookie season, like you said. Disastrous start to a second season. Kudos to Carolina and the coaching staff for taking a step back, having them sit down, getting Dalton in there. Like, that was just a smart move by Canales. and then giving him another shot once he's had a chance to take a breather. And then we kind of saw the Bryce Young we thought we were going to see when he came into the NFL. They were really feisty down the stretch. They won some games we didn't expect them to win. They were close in a bunch of games, and I think that's all you want to see, because this team is far from finished product anyways. You just want to see feistiness from that offense, and that's what we got. So I'm pretty optimistic about the Panthers offense with Canales and with Bryce Young showing signs of life. I think that, this is another just huge, like this is Undertaker out of a casket type of stuff. Like, he was really ready to be buried and totally came back from the dead. So if I have him, I'm holding him. I'm probably not buying, just because I'm still, worried about 5'10" quarterbacks who aren't that fast. But I do think that there's reason for optimism. And if you have them, you're probably just keeping them and hoping for the best, and that we get the return we were expecting from the jump.
Yeah, I have him on a Superflex team where I had to kind of fill the hole that I expected him to fill as my plug and play Superflex guy. And I'm now reignited on excitement to start him next year going into 2025, right? So definitely a hold for me, because if he does take another leap, then you're fine. He's almost where you expected him to be when you drafted him in your rookie draft, and he's kind of gotten himself back to being a little bit of a return on that investment, albeit you had to wait a couple of years to see it. Yeah, I think he definitely could be that. It's interesting that you said keep trade cut. He was around quarterback 21 and 24. My preliminary run through of my dynasty rankings has him at quarterback 21. So kind of bang on the value versus keep trade cut there. So validation for me. No, it's okay. Don't even do it. No,
I was just guessing, but let's look. Hold on. Quick.
I was spot on.
Fair enough. I don't know why I'm not
saying. Now you got to tell it. Now you got to say it.
Well, he's overall at 56, but I don't have specifically the quarterback rankings. I don't know. Yeah,
21.
Let's just say right. You nailed it, Trav.
Yeah, and these are the rankings you're going to want to be looking at when we finish them anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the Dynasty Underground
Don't
teams
rely
rankings.
on KTC rankings. The market is a fickle thing, right? We're just telling you what the market's saying.
Yeah, I've never relied too much on keep trade cut, but I always thought it was very interesting to see like the the brain trust of fantasy gamers going in there and valuing people and stuff. So pretty cool concept they got over there for sure.
Super useful tool.
Yeah, last one we're going to spend a little bit of time on for the quarterbacks is Russell Wilson. Not too much time either, Joe, because it was just, I think he's a guy who could be doing some hopping over the next couple of years, team to team. Mike Tomlin seems to have liked him, so I could see a return to Pittsburgh being definitely in the realm of possibilities. But I don't know if the performance met the relationship between head coach and quarterback, if that would make sense, because a couple of good games after he first came in, but really has fizzled down the stretch to the point where Marcus, our Steelers guy on the undroppables, is not very optimistic towards the playoffs. Even when I put a graphic out congratulating the uncovered teams who made the playoffs, Marcus said, you might as well just left the Steelers off of there. So I don't think Russell Wilson has sparked a bunch of confidence among the Steelers faithful. What is he doing for you as a fantasy gamer who might be looking or might have him on some rosters?
Yeah, I have him on one FFPC Superflex team. And he was kind of a godsend, to be honest. He was just one of those guys where his value dropped so much, like we talked about earlier. Like, I wasn't going to sell him, so he was just a quarterback I kept on my depth chart, hoping for the best. And he became super valuable down the stretch. I got some good starts out of him in the middle and late part of the season. I was trying to sell him for a second. There were no takers. No. If you can get a second for him, great. If you can't get that, then I don't think I would sell him for a third. I think he's probably going to still retain some value. We're probably still going to see some more starts. And maybe he keeps this job long term. It's hard to be super optimistic, though. I'm certainly not. I would not be buying him.
No.
I'm probably holding or selling if I can get decent value or have other options at the quarterback position. But for the most part, it's a hold or a sell.
Yeah, 100%. Lots of the mobility that he had earlier in his career just isn't necessarily there anymore. And yeah, it's this offense continued to be kind of limited ceiling in Pittsburgh. with Arthur Smith at the helm, whether it was Justin Fields really or Russell Wilson. I think Justin Fields brought some interesting things to the table, but Russell Wilson was definitely kind of the more stable presence there after he got in. So interesting to see where he goes. He was on a super cheap deal. I think it was 1 year, 1.1 the Steelers were able to have him at because he was making so much money from the Broncos still. So interesting to see what the Steelers do at the quarterback position with both of those guys potentially. Both of those guys are free agents, actually. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Any more you want to mention for the quarterbacks, Joe, before we ride into these running backs here and then try and get out of this bad boy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say these are, for your super flex teams, backup quarterbacks, but Malik Willis kind of came back from the dead, right? We had completely written him off as a non-asset from his days in Tennessee. I actually cut him in a couple of places, and I ended up regretting that because when he was forced into action this year on very short notice in Green Bay, he performed really, really well. So, Malik Willis, especially with his rushing ability, is an interesting sort of spot starter, fourth quarterback for your super flex teams on deeper rosters. Mac Jones showed that he was somewhat competent, right? It wasn't as disastrous as it was in New England. I wouldn't say he was good by any stretch, but he kept he kept Brian Thomas afloat from a fantasy standpoint and looked pretty good down the stretch, filling in for Trevor Lawrence. And then I just have a soft spot for Drew Lock. I mean, his week 17 performance with 300 passing yards and 4 touchdowns shows you that this guy at the very least is fun. He's almost got like a little bit of a Jameis factor to him.
Totally.
I think he's a guy that's going to hang around the NFL, be a backup who's a gunslinger whenever he gets into action. And so if you got the space on your roster and you need a little additional help at quarterback, I like all three of these guys, but yeah, I'd say Drew Lock's the most fun.
Totally. He's like in that Gardner Minshew tier where you love seeing him trot in off the bench, but you don't want to go into a season with him as your starter. Again, sorry, Joe.
Yeah, no, you're just biting your nails if you have to start him, but you might get good outcomes. Yeah.
Totally.
Lots more fun than Minshew.
Yeah, true that. The swag he brings.
Personality standpoint, but
yeah. I might even add my guy Kenny Pickett to that. He was decent in the limited time he had with the Eagles this year. Obviously a good offense that would insulate his skill set, of course, but somebody who I could see another team giving a shot on and somebody who I would stash as like the 5th or 6th on my bench. Because we mentioned last show, you want to be stacking the shit out of these guys who might have potential to start 2 or 3 games because that pocket of games might be a pocket where you need to fill in, right? So stack them up. Okay, Joe, we're going to move into the running backs. In my opinion, the sexiest position in all of fantasy football because when you have stalwarts, you feel great about your team. One guy who showed us some stalwart capabilities in spurts this season, somebody who I kindly refer to as the Dobb Goblin, J.K. Dobbins. One of my favorite running backs league-wide. I am an Ohio State fan, so that might tell you something, but have loved everything that he's done when he's been healthy in the NFL and another good season. Started us off with 200-yard performances with the Los Angeles Chargers. Bell cow for the first few seasons, first few games, which seemed pretty nice in that Chargers offense. Of course, he got banged up throughout the season a couple times, missed some games, but now he's healthy coming down the stretch. Could have a chance to boost his dynasty stock a little bit more in the playoffs, Joe. How are you treating a guy like J.K. Dobbins, and maybe draw on some of your process stuff when we talk about a guy who's had catastrophic injuries like he has?
Yeah, sure. So let's just talk about his story, right? He had what I call as a Warriors fan also, the Klay Thompson, right? Torn ACL and torn Achilles, back-to-back years, just as brutal as it gets. At a position where you rely on explosiveness, so being sapped of that is just devastating. His all-time high in September of 2020 was 72.36. Of everybody we've talked about today, he had the biggest drop from 72.36 to his all-time low in September of 24, just a few months ago, to 9.24. That's like a 5,000 some change point drop. So everybody had written him off, including myself. I just thought there was no coming back from his injuries. Was happy he was getting a shot with the Chargers. Sure enough, he became a starting running back, put up some really great games, particularly early in the season. His current value is sitting at 31.45, so that's a 2,200 point improvement. I think he's still only 25 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He's an unrestricted free agent after this year. Obviously, the injuries are always going to be a concern, and I think just from running backs in general, as we talked about last week, and we talk about at the Undroppables a lot, running backs are almost always a sell the high situation, right? So I would sell him for a second. If I'm not getting at least a second, I'm probably not selling him. But now that the season's done, I'd be pretty happy with that. We'll see where he ends up. I tend to think he's probably going to end up sticking around with the Chargers, but we'll see what the future holds for him. I'm just happy he is not done as I thought he was. So big time Undertaker GIF from our guy JK. What'd you call him? Dobby? What?
The Dob Goblin. The Dob Goblin. Yeah, that's one of my best ones. That's one of my best ones.
Absolute monster. So it's fitting. Yeah, what a beast.
Yeah, no, I like it, man. And I think definitely to your point, the best case Ontario for him would be to stay in Los Angeles with the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. It'll be interesting to see because that is a very cushy situation. But I think JK could end up kind of transcending situation, especially if he's given maybe kind of the 60 and a 60-40 split, because I think that would help him to potentially stay healthy, help him to keep a little bit of that explosiveness, which we saw a little bit of that come back this year. He had a 5.1% explosive rush rate. So, he had a little bit of that back this year, and we just like to see it for a guy who's had so much turbulence in his career. Looked great coming out of the draft as one of those explosive guys, but those injuries, man, those will kill you. And as us fantasy gamers, when we attach to these guys, it'll break your heart. It just breaks your heart.
Totally.
Okay, from one of my most beloved running backs to another one of my most beloved running backs, a guy who I actually got the chance to interview back in the True North Fantasy Football days, and fellow Canadian kid, Chuba Hubbard. Great season this year for the Carolina Panthers. I think kind of the domino that fell for him to do that was killing our souls in terms of Jonathan Brooks. Originally, he killed our souls because he was producing so well that we didn't think Jonathan Brooks would come in and be that workhorse for the Carolina Panthers. And then, of course, Jonathan Brooks has another catastrophic knee injury, and he's not looking like the running back who we thought he was going to be, and that longer-term future is looking much more murky. So Chuba Hubbard gets that new contract, 4 years, $33 million, I believe it was, for the Carolina Panthers. So he's going to be in there for the next couple of years. What are you expecting from him, and how did that value shift kind of impact your perception of Chuba Hubbard?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's wheels up. It's interesting. We're doing Undertaker GIFs, but this isn't even an Undertaker GIF because he didn't die. He had like a near-death experience, right?
Yeah, maybe a little more.
We thought that his value was going to fall off a cliff, but then, he played so well that it became pretty clear that Brooks wasn't going to just take this job. And then mid-season, they re-signed Chuba Hubbard to a longer-term contract before we even saw Brooks on the field. So they were already sold on Brooks. I think it was wheels up at that point that he was going to at least continue to be a flex-worthy player, probably a running back too. So, and he's proved to deserve it. And as this offense improved and as, we saw Bryce Young start to hit his stride, as we already talked about, Chuba Hubbard, I think that looks pretty promising. I don't think we're going to see Brooks till late next season again next year, if we see him at all. So it kind of seems like he's got it all to himself for now. Wheels up.
Yeah, I think to that point, he's probably a pretty hard guy for you to go out and buy right now.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely a hold as a guy who is going to be, in my opinion, a weekly running back 2 for rosters in 2025. This year was great for him. And of course, Canadian kid, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. Maybe that's why I put a near-death experience on here instead of a complete death Joe. But 1,000-yard season, 10 rushing touchdowns, PPR running back 12. Love to see it. 16.3 points per game as the running back 13 in that category. And just really some new ceiling that we saw from Chuba Hubbard. So I was happy to see that, and happy to see the Canadian guy in it's kind of a hard path to travel to get from Canada out to the NFL. And so he did it, which is really good. So happy for him and excited to see him enter into his Canadian badass era to draw on that Undertaker theme that we've got here. it's going to be riding Harleys into the end zone for a couple seasons for the Carolina Panthers is Chuba Hubbard. A little more rapid fire on some of these running backs, but the first guy that we're going to talk about was another 1,000-yard rusher, so if you feel so inclined, give him his just due, and that would be Rico Dowdle from the Dallas Cowboys. Definitely a lot of people were kind of hyping him coming into the season. Zeke came in there, which didn't really do a lot for people, but we just kind of thought that it was going to be a mess for these guys, where a lot of people thought just give Rico Dowdle the job. Do you think this is a product of some volume, like some necessary volume, or do you think Dowdle's a guy that we might want to be looking at for our fantasy teams?
Yeah, this is another guy that didn't come back from the dead. He started off dead, right? We never thought anything of Rico Dowdle. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, all right, I guess he's Dallas's running back one. So no, he actually impressed me this year. I don't think he's anything to write home about. I don't think anybody's going to get excited about buying him, although I did see some surprising trades for him this year where I think he went for a second in one of my leagues, and then he got traded again for an even higher second. So,
wow.
So that's frankly more than I thought he was worth. Kudos to those teams. I'm probably not buying it just because the talent profile doesn't really excite me. I think he's one of those guys that you keep on your bench, and if he ends up playing, he's found money, and that's what he was this season, is found money. But so he's definitely like we already said with all running backs, I think he's a sell if you can get any kind of draft capital for any kind of meaningful draft capital for him. I would do it. But will it continue? I'm sure they're drafting a running back this offseason, right? We said that last year, but I'm sure of it this year.
Yeah, it's a bit of a deeper class this season as well, too. So going to be some running backs to be had. Eagles fan here, so I hope they find none of them. But of course, I have to keep it unbiased in fantasy analysis. And I think, Dowdle was that found money, did as best as you can expect, but it's going to be hard to see him catching this kind of opportunity elsewhere. I want to talk about some more found money a little bit, maybe a pocket of found money within the season, and that came from Sean Tucker. I know you like Sean Tucker. I didn't really know much about him going into the season, to be honest, Joe, and I love Bucky Irving, and I really like Rachaad White as well. So tell me why you think Sean Tucker might be able to carve out a role in Tampa Bay or maybe elsewhere, and how you'd value him for Dynasty.
Yeah, so this is another guy who his all-time high in value was pre-NFL draft, because during the process in 2023, they found out he had some heart condition. So he was a guy that we thought was going to go in like the second or third round. He ended up going, I believe it was undrafted. And so he went from 35.57 to a low of 902 points. And then and that was October of 24. And then his current value is sitting at about 2,035. So an 1,100 point increase. It's kind of tough because, Rachaad White's an unrestricted free agent in 2026. We got at least one more year of Rachaad White. Obviously, Bucky Irving's got 3 more years left on his rookie deal. And so Sean Tucker is a restricted free agent in 2026 as well. So we've got another year of this kind of 3-headed monster, unless they trade somebody or one of these guys gets hurt. But it's hard to sell a guy that can rattle off 180 yards rushing in a game. We saw that this season, and I can't unsee it. He's the most explosive back in that backfield. Bucky Irving he's got this short area burst. He's got this great lateral agility. He's quick. He's quick to find the hole, all of that. But Sean Tucker's got that plus long speed. And so, I went into this season firmly in Rachaad White's camp, and now I think he's my third favorite back in that backfield. So I can't sell him. I can't quit Sean Tucker. I'm going to keep him. And when he gets his shots, I think he's going to win you games. He won me a game big time. I had the stones to start him that week where Bucky Irving was out. Where Rachaad White was out, and he had that monster performance, came out of nowhere. That win ended up being the difference between me being like the 6th seed and the 2nd seed. It was that tight.
Nice.
So it was a huge, huge win for that team, and I'm just a believer in Tucker.
Nice. I love when you take shots on those guys and just, it's like a dart throw start and it works out for you. KJ Osborne is a previous guy of mine that had some of those in his Minnesota days. And so you just kind of never forget those guys, right? Like you will remember Sean Tucker forever, whether he has another carry in the NFL or not.
Oh yeah, no, he'll be on my teams for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, so keeping it moving down the ones that we're going to rapid fire. Kareem Hunt, to me, he is just like a dead fantasy asset. Yeah.
I mean, he fell all the way down to 189 in terms of his all-time low. Everybody thought it was over for him. Ends up signing with Kansas City, rebounds to 1463. This is as good as it's going to get, guys. Like, if you could get anything for Kareem Hunt, take it now. He doesn't have that much time left in the league. He played admirably. He did a great job in that role. But, clear, screaming sell signal.
Yeah, and don't let him clog up a roster spot either. If it's agonizingly impossible to sell him, I think you can be happy dropping Kareem Hunt if you have a younger, maybe somebody who has a longer runway to get some more production. You can feel okay with dropping Kareem Hunt. How about Jordan Mason? Because he showed really, really, really well for the San Francisco 49ers this season. He is a free agent coming up. Do you think a team gives him a shot to maybe be the 1B in their backfield this offseason? Because I think what he showed in San Francisco could make that happen.
Yeah, so he's a restricted free agent, so it'll be interested to see what the Niners do, if what kind of offer he gets and if the Niners match it. But they've still got Eli Mitchell, who they shelved on IR. I think he might be a free agent after this year too. I need to look into that. Isaac Guerrero, obviously on a rookie deal, showed well for the Niners also. So I don't think they need to break the bank for him, given they're going to be spending a lot of money on Brock Purdy this offseason, presumably. So I bet he's gone, and it would be, this is going to be really situation dependent. I think he's someone you probably just make lowball offers for. His current value is commensurate with like a 3rd round pick. So, probably like an early 3rd round pick. So if you can get him for like a mid, late 3rd or a 4th plus, a Kareem Hunt, then I would go ahead and do it. But I think he's a guy you're buying for cheap, but don't, it's going to be very situation dependent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just hoping he ends up becoming a running back 3 in the NFL for a team next season. I think that's really well put there. Yeah, Jordan Mason, youthful, as good a guy as any to take a shot in the tier that he's in at the running back landscape. Cam Akers, interesting guy. Came back with the Vikings.
Another guy, he was, he had the dreaded double Achilles injury. That's, even worse than J.K. Dobbins. So he fell from 76.43 all-time high to 373. So that's, in the Kareem Hunt territory. But the difference is he's 25 years old. So that's even more damning. He's rehabbed his value to 1683 currently. So it's a 1,300 point improvement. That's basically 4th round pick range. I think I'd buy Cam for a 4th. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's still young. Obviously an injury risk, just like J.K. Dobbins. I tend to think Minnesota's going to want to keep him around. They let him go last offseason, then they traded for him this season.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to want to keep him, and I think he showed pretty well and fits pretty well in that offense. So I'm pretty interested in Cam Akers, but just know that, the next injury could be the last.
Yeah, totally. I do like him from the sense that as kind of a handcuff, he's one of those guys who can take over a majority of the role that's being left behind by the injured starter. So I do like that when I'm looking for these handcuffs that can give you big weeks if the guy goes down. I think for me, when you're talking about selling him for a 4th round pick, though, I'd probably rather just keep that 4th round pick and take a shot on one of these later round running backs, right? You talked about it as well, right? Buy. Sorry. I would have a hard time buying him for a 4th round because I would rather be using that 4th round pick, on one of these younger running backs, maybe try and find myself that James Robinson or something like that. So that's probably what I would do. I've just maybe been a bit more of a Cam Akers detractor previously with what we've seen. But yeah, he is a guy who could take over a skill set or a full workload if he's healthy behind somebody.
Honestly, it's interesting that you say that because I was a believer, right? And I did find during this exercise that I kind of default to, on the questionable ones, to my priors, right? And I think
Right.
that's natural. That's human instinct, right? It's like,
Yeah, totally.
yeah, he's back. It's like, this one I believe in, this one I don't. Oh, and it coincides perfectly with what I thought of them as
Yep.
rookies. Right?
We'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it. Total human nature thing for sure there. And honestly, like, not a terrible guy, because he did come into the league with a 3-down skill set. And like I said, if I'm looking for handcuffs, those are the guys that I'm looking for. Okay, let's round this puppy out with some tight ends, Joe, and finish it off here. And we're going to start with probably one of the most surprising tight end performances of all of 2024 came from Jonnu Smith. And I think his resurrection kind of started last year when he was playing with the Atlanta Falcons. He had some really good stretches of play there, showed himself as an absolute demon in the yards after the catch category, and that came to fruition again in 2024 with the Miami Dolphins. Talk about a perfect storm too. Jonnu Smith jumping into the Miami Dolphins was a perfect storm. He was like a top 5 tight end, putting up, tight end 1 numbers for a good stretch of like 4 or 5 weeks. I think it was great to see, and we like a guy with his profile, with the ability to do it by himself, because we know that he's not going to rely as much on the type of work that he's going to get. He's going to be able to do some of it by himself. So signed through 2028, Joe. Is that something that you're ready to attach to in such a high-powered offense in Miami?
I am very much willing to buy into Jonnu Smith. And I think that there's like a lesson here and a theme with a lot of these tight ends that we're going to talk about. And that's just, at this position, it's so hard to learn. Very few guys are Brock Bowers and show up and dominate on day one, right? It almost never happens, right? That's why he's such an outlier. But you always want to bet on athleticism at the tight end position, because eventually, once they do figure out how to, do the, put their hand in the dirt and block and do the other stuff, learn, all the nuances of the position, that athleticism will be an asset to them once they're getting their play time, once they find themselves in the right situation. So we've seen it with a bunch of guys. Why am I blanking? We saw it with David Njoku. We've now seen it with Jonnu Smith. There's countless other examples.
Yeah, it's hard to pull them.
Yeah, we're about to talk about some more of them. But so always bet on athleticism. Now he's in the right situation. He's going to be there for a while. I think there are void years after 2026. So I think he's actually like a 2026 free agent, most likely, depending on which direction that franchise is going. But yeah, he's a guy whose value fell to as low as 434 on Keep Trade Cut. And now it's sitting at 27.26. So a huge rise in value for Jonnu Smith. Tyreek Hill sounds like he might be gone in Miami. So Jonnu's role might actually improve and increase. So I'm a buyer.
Yeah, and I think just kind of to attach to that point, because I would agree with everything that you said there, with the Tyreek Hill news, maybe go out and buy some Jalen Waddle as well. Because once Tyreek actually moves, you're not going to be able to buy Jalen Waddle. So it might just be the time. And you just kind of sparked that thought for me, Joe. Another athletic tight end who hasn't necessarily put it together yet. But to your point, like, I think it's important to stay with these guys, because the tight end's a little bit different than some of these other positions. You cannot expect first-year production. We got some from some of these guys, but do not expect that to be the norm. Whereas with wide receivers, you do now. It's just the norm for them to produce in year one, right? And running backs who are drafted in the first round or two, maybe not this year is a good example, but those guys are expected to produce early. I don't think we can do that with these tight ends unless they're like top 10 drafted. So we got to stick with some of these guys that are athletic, and Chig Okonkwo is on the bottom of a lot of my benches, including tight end premium teams. And I'm just, I'm not sure if I need to get out or not, because I haven't seen it, haven't been able to start him. And when he does do it, I'm already kind of off the bandwagon. Are you in that boat too?
No, I've actually played Chig Okonkwo perfectly. I'm really proud of myself. This rarely happens, but it's like I traded him in 2023 near the height of his value. And then I bought him back in that same league this year for really cheap, like a 5th round pick, before he started to take off. And, a lot of people probably didn't realize this because Tennessee was out of the playoff hunt. But down the stretch, he had a couple of double-digit target games. In Week 15, he had 10 targets. In Week 16, he had 11 targets, 9 catches, 8 catches in Week 15. Week 17, he had 7 targets, 5 catches. I mean, that will pay the bills at tight end. He's only in, what are we talking about? I think this is he's going to be going into year 4, if I'm not mistaken. He's an unrestricted free agent in 2026. So I guess that means he's going into year 4. And there's another one where we're just banking on the athleticism, right? The dude ran a 4.52 at 243 pounds. That's pretty rare. There aren't many tight ends that can do that. That's incredible athleticism. We've seen him as sort of like an H-back. We've seen him as a tight end. We've seen him catch passes close to the line of scrimmage. We've seen him catch it a little bit deeper. So we'll see what happens with, the offensive, play calling and quarterback position in Tennessee. But I'm kind of bullish on Chig Okonkwo. This is like a mini Jonnu.
I like that. No, I like that. And I've thought that previously, but I think maybe I'm just a little bit spurned at this point. And I might be a little bit hesitant to attach to that end of season production just because teams are always in flux, especially a team that had the record of the Tennessee Titans. And so with that weak depth chart that they have, I think maybe he was just kind of a beneficiary of kind of some end of season kind of garbage stuff. I didn't see the time in the game, but I mean, like, their season is over. So like the garbage final quarter of their season, as opposed to the garbage final quarter of a game, if that makes sense, trying to get him more involved, which I hope they do. But I thought that the last couple of seasons, and it hasn't really paid off for me. So I'm just ready to move on as well, which I think, he's a guy that you can be ready to do both with because he does have that upside. But if you do feel like you need to move in another direction to find something that you can trust more, I think there are some options out there on the tight end market.
I'm optimistic on him. All right, who else we got?
Well, just a couple. Mike Gesicki is on there and Zach Ertz. And I guess we'll start with Mike Gesicki because I want to say I really wish Jax was here again because Jax has historically hated Mike Gesicki and I have loved Mike Gesicki. And so suck it, Jax. My validation has come a little bit late, but it's better late than never. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, another athletic tight end that we're talking about, right? And he came back around, obviously landed in a great situation with Joe Burrow. Every game that T. Higgins missed, we saw, Gesicki sometimes being the leader of that team in targets. His value fell from 43.26 in 2020 all the way down to 7.99 in January of 24. It's back at 17.55, so it's by no means has it rebounded. The market perception is still pretty low, but the production was good. He's an unrestricted free agent too. I think I'd like to see him stay in Cincinnati.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know if I'm buying just because, again, Gesicki's how old at this point?
I don't know. He's got to be like 30, 32 or something like that. I can find that for you.
I don't think he's quite that old, but he's been around a long time. I don't know. He's let us down so many times. I just feel like you can't really sell him for that much. He is 29. Yeah. So I don't think you can sell him for that much. He's certainly not anywhere near the age cliff for tight end. We've got a few more years of Gesicki. It's just a matter of the situation he finds himself in. Nobody's really been willing to sign him to a long-term deal on his last few deals, right? So that says something too. But hopefully he found a home in Cincinnati. And I'd probably just hold if I had him. I don't think I'm actively buying, and I don't think I'm getting enough in the market if I'm selling him.
Right. I think I might not actively buy, but in teams where I'm tight end needy, put a couple of feelers out there just because if you're tight end needy, you're not necessarily always going to be going for the top end, or maybe on teams where you don't have the assets to attack the top end of the position. I think Mike Gesicki's athleticism could, we saw the upside happen this year. Hopefully he does stay in that offense.
Who are you buying, Chig Okonkwo or Mike Gesicki?
Gesicki.
For fourth, yeah. I'm buying Chig.
Yeah. See, I think Gesicki will continue, even if he moves teams, to try to attach to those high-powered offenses, which he did this year, and he saw an amazing season. I just don't like Chig's going to be in Tennessee a couple years, and I don't expect too much from them, and I don't know if that does anything for him as far as gaining value moving into free agency.
Interesting that the guy who pronounces it GIF also calls him Gesicki.
It's Gesicki.
And the guy who pronounces it GIF calls him Gesicki.
I told the people at the top of the show that's psychopath behavior, Joe. And so
now you've got me second guessing myself. I've been calling him Gesicki for years. Have I been?
You mean second guessing? Are you second guessing yourself, Joe?
That's it. Let's call it. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's a wrap on that show. That was a fun one, Joe. Just a two-banger with the two of us. Jax wasn't able to make it, but we love him nonetheless. Want to thank all the people for listening. I had a good time, and we hope that you did as well. And this is just the start, episode 2 of the Dynasty Underground. So I hope you're coming along for the ride with us. Of course, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Castbox, and some other audio platforms. The meat and potatoes. Find us on YouTube. Please make sure you subscribe. That's where you're going to find all of the videos. We got some shorts and some clips coming as well. And I mentioned our boys at the Dynasty Pulse as well. You'll see some more stuff coming from their channel too. So it's been a good time. Episode 2 is in the books, just scratching the surface. So we will be here for one Joe Kuvatakis. I am Travis Seal, and also for the absent Jax Falcone. We will see you next week. Peace, everyone.